This week, we've seen some incredible acceleration in the artificial intelligence space, with GPT-4 being released a couple of days ago, and announcements about Microsoft including GPT in all of its Office products just today. The world is all in on AI. So here at LinkedIn, we've been thinking a lot about AI and have been making some exciting announcements of our own. So I'm super honored to be talking to someone in the middle of all the action. Hey there, I'm your host, Ray Villalobos, a software engineer and senior staff instructor at LinkedIn Learning. So today I'm talking to Xavier Amatrain, someone who has been at the forefront of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Xavier is currently the vice president of AI for product strategy at LinkedIn. He was the VP of engineering at Quora and worked as an engineering director at Netflix. Xavier, how are you doing?
Very good. Great to be here.
Yeah, can you share a little bit about your journey from research to several positions in the public sector to your role now at LinkedIn?
Sure. As you can tell, Ray, I have a gray beard as you do. So I've been around the block for a little while. I have a long uh, story behind my back. But just to summarize, I I'm originally from Spain, from Barcelona, and
Mhm.
I was born and raised there. Studied my PhD in computer science, and I was very passionate at that time about the intersection of technology and creativity and art. And in fact, my PhD was in the intersection of technology and music. So that's how I got started in tech. I went into AI and machine learning right around that time. And one thing I realized very soon is that I love the intersection not only of technology and art, but technology and people. And I love the idea of using data and algorithm and machine learning to understand people better. And that's what got me to recommender systems. So I spent quite a few years in my life doing research in recommendation, personalization, and just understanding people through data and algorithms. First in academia, then at Netflix. I moved from academia to industry because, as fun as it is to be a researcher and go to conferences and publish papers, I felt like I needed to have some impact in the real world. So I moved to Silicon Valley. I moved to industry, and I moved to Netflix at a very exciting time. In fact, fun fact: the Netflix stock dropped 80% the week I joined. So I was like, "Oh my gosh, what did I do?" That was the whole Quickster fiasco time many years ago. But anyway, it was really fun. Netflix was going into streaming, into internationalization, and I was put in charge of starting and leading the machine learning algorithms team, and we built recommendations, search algorithms into the product. I was just at the right time and at the right place. After that, as you mentioned, I went to Quora. I led the engineering team at Quora and got into understanding much more the value of text. There's a lot of text at Quora, questions and answers and whatnot. And soon after, I decided I had to bite the bullet and start my own company, right? I was in Silicon Valley, I was in tech, and I had big ideas about like how to use AI and machine learning. And I co-founded a startup in the AI for healthcare space about 6 years ago. So it's Cure Health. It's still doing great. I was there for about 5.5 years, and very recently decided to move on and join LinkedIn because of a great opportunity to lead generative AI innovation and product features at a product like LinkedIn. So very excited about that. I joined late last year.
Yeah, I can definitely see that you are very good at being in the right place at the right time because I think this is an exciting time for everyone, especially at LinkedIn. I'm gonna have to go check my stock after this meeting just in case, but we'll see what happens. So as usual, everyone, you can ask questions in the chat. I'll be getting to those at a certain point in the show. And if I can also add them as I see some questions relevant to what we're talking about, that will be great. So let's get into the main interview questions. Shabi, I do think we have somebody just saying hi in the chat. So yeah, feel free to go ahead and add your questions to the chat and we will get to them as soon as we can. So many things to talk about today. And we saw so many announcements, really huge announcements for all different kinds of company. So this, week we saw, like I mentioned, things from Microsoft and, Midjourney just released like this morning, and just really an exciting time to be in our space right now. Let me just pull this up here. One of the things that I really enjoyed, as I research where you came from, is one of the things that you talked about was this thing called the paradox of choice, and I thought it was fascinating in watching some of the videos that I saw about you, and you talked about that. Uh, actually having more choices ends up perhaps letting people have a more negative effect on their lives. So, can you talk about your approach for that at Netflix? I'm sure that there's a lot of people who are interested about some of the technology and the things that happen there, and how that's actually impacted some of the other work that you've been doing lately in AI.
Yeah, great question. So I remember when I first read the book by Barry Schwartz, The Paradox of Choice. Actually, I first saw a video, and there's a lot of videos of talks from him. But then I went and read the whole book because it was so fascinating. This was highly unintuitive to me, and I think it is for a lot of people, right? There's a lot of really interesting sociological and psychological experiments in Barry's books and career in general. But I think the takeaway, the TLDR is, if you give people a lot of choices, they not only end up making worse decisions, they end up making less decisions, right? So you become so overwhelmed by the fact that you need to decide that you end up not deciding and just not choosing anything, which
Hmm.
in itself is a decision, right? But it's probably a bad one. And I think one of the key examples that Barry uses is a little shop that has an experiment on using, they're selling jams, and they make an experiment on whether they can offer 64 flavors of jams or 12 flavors of jams. And it's the data is very clear. When they are exhibiting 64 flavors of jams, they end up selling less than when they
Hmm.
only offer 12. Just people get overwhelmed with having to choose and pick from 64, and they end up just walking away, which is fascinating because you usually tend to think, well, give people choices and give them control and they'll figure it out and they'll be happier. And it turns out that's not the case. And we had a lot of experiments now back in the digital space when we were building recommendations on Netflix and afterwards, that prove time and again the same idea, right? It's like you want to think that giving people more choices and more control is better. And in fact, some users will get annoyed because of that. It's like, why don't you
Hmm.
let me browse the whole collection? It's like, well, because you think you want that. But the reality is, the more we give you the ability to browse, the more you end up not choosing anything and then become tired. And in fact, even as of today, people will tell you that. It's like, gosh, I open Netflix, I start browsing for half an hour, and then I decide to go to bed because I'm just tired. I don't want to pick anything. So I think that leads into a lot of really interesting decisions, which are a little bit counterintuitive, and some of them might be controversial, even, right? It's like you need to pick for the user, or you need to encourage or nudge them to make a decision by cutting away some of the choices, and that's again counterintuitive and maybe controversial. But we had a lot of examples. In one of them at Netflix, for example, we decided, there's this thing at Netflix that's called My List. It was called the queue in the past, where people can you can save things that you say you want to watch later. And at the beginning, Netflix offered the ability for the user to really sort things out, and you can go in and change the order. And honestly, very few people used it, and people ended up not using the list at all. Now, when we implemented an algorithm that did that for you, then people went back to using it and using it much more. So it turned out that giving less control and having the algorithm do the work for you ended up being a net positive. Um, that is, again, fascinating, and something that has informed and informs some of my work later on. Even in healthcare, which is a completely different domain, you would imagine that getting people more information and more options, just basically having them, um, giving them the ability to search online and find out about their health and their healthcare options would be a net positive. And for a minority people, it is, but for the vast majority, it ends up being negative. So first of all, they end up making worse decisions. They end up getting to places where they shouldn't have gone. It's the famous sort of like Dr. Google effect, where you
Hmm.
end up thinking that you are, you know, having some really bad disease when you don't. Um, and then some people end up not going to the doctor because they're just overwhelmed with everything they've read online, or they end up not trusting the doctor because they've read something online. So it's very interesting to see that sometimes um, constraining the options and sort of leading people in a way, it's going to be better for them. It's not better for the company or for anyone else. It's really better for the person who ends up making a better choice and doing the right thing.
That's so interesting, and I can totally relate to that in my life. I know when I go pick up, like, say, the milk, I guess when I was younger, there used to be just maybe a couple of different options. Now there's like, do you want soy milk? Do you want like oatmeal milk and this, that, and the other? And it's just overwhelming. And you're right. Sometimes I do want to shut myself off. Interesting to note that that really has some effects on things that you don't think they do, like healthcare and making choices about perhaps a career will be a way that it would impact the sort of work that we're doing here today. So that's pretty cool. One of the interesting things that I heard you cover is the different ways that engineers have sought to build these different kind of recommendations, everything from collaborative filtering to behavioral to context based. Now I know this is pretty technical, but can you talk a little bit about what makes an effective recommendation engine and what happens today when AI sort of takes over or maybe assists some of those choices?
Yeah, a great question. Also, a very complex question. I have long videos and courses online where I talk about this exact same thing for hours. But I will say, um, very importantly, recommendation systems are a combination of different things, right? There's the algorithm for sure, which you alluded to, and what are the algorithmic approaches. There's also three other things are really important. One is the objective function. The other one is the metric that you use to measure. And the last one is the data. So I think when you think about a recommendation system, and actually in general about any machine learning AI algorithm that you're going to put in a product in front of people, those four things are really key, right? You could have the greatest algorithm in the world that is optimized to the wrong objective function or uses the wrong metric, and you're going to be completely off. I mean, you're going to be producing negative results. You're not going to make a positive impact on your business or your product. So having an alignment between those four things is really key. Now, um, in a broad sense, I usually say if you have to pick one algorithmic approach, collaborative filtering usually is the way to go. Collaborative filtering is simple and it works most of the time if you have the right data. Collaborative filtering, the idea is very simple. You just recommend me something that similar users have liked. So all you
Hmm.
need to do is find users that are similar to me and recommend to me what those users um, like in the past, right? So this association between users that like the same thing is really powerful and drives most of the recommendations for most systems. Now, in any practical system, you will actually have a combination of collaborative filtering and content-based filtering and social-based recommendations. So you can combine them, right? So you don't need to pick one or the other. And in fact, more recently with deep neural net and embeddings, that has become pretty easy to do. You can combine different approaches using different kinds of embeddings, and that's what most modern recommender systems nowadays are using.
Hmm. Well, super interesting. So, what do you think is the role of AI in these kind of recommendations? I know this perhaps not a problem that you're solving, but I think it kind of relates that things that AI is doing, making inferences and being able to understand context, are kind of changing maybe existing models. So, how do you see AI perhaps, sort of maybe it's better, it has some inferences it could be better, maybe it's going to be worse, maybe we'll never be able to watch anything anymore.
No, I mean, it's a great question, but I think it's a it's a deep question, because in order to answer it, I need to even define what is AI, right? So
Right.
AI is a term that has been used for a very long time, for over 50 years. And I think, if I understand your question correctly, when you say what is the role of AI, you are referring to the new AI, right? But AI,
Correct.
let's
Mhm.
remember, it's been used for a very long time, even before machine learning, right? There's the history of AI goes back to the 50s, when um, people were using what so-called expert systems. They were basically encoding rules by hand and saying,
Mhm.
if this happens, then do this. If this doesn't happen, then do this other thing. And that would be a very complex sort of like decision tree that was encoded by hand and was used, and that was called AI. Now, um, as you can imagine, the connection between AI and recommender system algorithm has been there since the early days, because there was always some kind of algorithm behind the scenes that was actually deciding what to recommend to the users. In fact, just a historical note: when I went to Netflix, the recommendation algorithm that was in the product in production was encoded by hand. There were numbers that were saying,
Hmm.
like, if this multiply times 0.5, then and that had been determined basically running experiments and almost by hand. So there
Hmm.
was some AI, but very crude manual sort of like determined AI, and that was replaced by machine learning, and then came deep learning, and now we have generative AI. So there's all these different flavors of AI, and I will say, going back to your original questions, they've all played a role in different ways in recommendation algorithms, but also in any kind of algorithm. Search, for example, is the
Hmm.
same way, right? Search originally was, just a hand coded algorithm that then came Google and sort of polished in a different way, and then came deep learning, and now generative AI, and all of those are iterations over AI that have all played a role in improving all these different products.
So do you feel that what's really going to make a difference in this new age of AI is the generative nature of what these new things are doing, or is it more the transformer aspect? So the generative part creates, inferences based on what it's been pre-trained, but the transformer is the part that kind of takes all that knowledge and, manages to sort of convert it into something that can yield results.
Yeah, it is a great question. I think when people ask about, like, what is new about this new AI, right? For somebody like me who's been around for quite a while, I've had to think hard about, like, what makes it so special. I think
Mm,
that the generative aspect is an important one, right? The fact that it appears as this new AI is simply generating things that did not exist before. That's pretty fascinating, particularly from a creative perspective. But to be fair, that already happened in the past. There were other AI um, models before this generative boom, like generative adversarial
mm,
networks, GANs, that were doing
mhm.
similar things. I think the key thing that happens here is, in this new wave of generative AI, is one, and very importantly, this ability to learn on the fly is the so-called zero-shot learning. So these models, one of the really most fascinating things, even to me, is that they can learn as you talk to them, right? So
Hmm.
basically, yes, they've been trained on a lot of stuff and have a lot of knowledge encoded uh, in their weights and in their complex networks. But you can also input some new knowledge and say, hey, this is me. Now tell me something about me. And they actually can tell you something about you that they've learned on the fly. This ability is something that to me is really key and really surprising. And I think it's something that most people are not explicitly aware of, but they sense when they're like having this conversation, like, wow, it's actually learning from things that
Hmm.
I'm telling it, right? So that is really fascinating. And the other very important part is the fact that you can interface with them in natural language, right? Until
Hmm.
now, it's like, yeah, you might have some AI behind the Netflix product, but you're really interfacing with it with a click, right? You're clicking on things and it doesn't give you the sense of like it's so intelligent. Or on TikTok, yes, there's a lot of AI behind the TikTok feed, but all you're doing is swiping right or left or down or up. And I think that doesn't give you the impression that you're having a real AI conversation. Being able to interface in natural language, it becomes sort of like much more approachable, and I think those two things are key. So yeah, transformers and diffusion models and all these new algorithms are really what enables all of that. But I think the zero shot learning capabilities and the natural language interface are probably something that are key to sort of like why now all of a sudden people are like, wow, blown away, right?
Totally. Totally. So, in your last role, you co-founded Cure Health to help democratize high quality healthcare, which I think is fantastic. So, before we move on to all the fantastic LinkedIn stuff, not surprisingly, AI in health has actually been a lot of the news lately. So, where do you see the future of the health industry and how it's going to be sort of supplemented by AI in the next few years?
Yeah, great question. And of course, I've spent a few years in my life thinking hard about this. And I would say fundamentally, there's two huge problems to healthcare in the world, right? There are some that are more specific to different countries and different situations, but in the world, there's probably like two big problems. One is healthcare does not scale, right? It's like it's
Hmm.
becoming exponentially more expensive. There's not enough doctors and nurses in the world. We can't really make enough of them to take care of the people. And what that creates is a lot of people don't have access, let alone good access to good healthcare, right? So the scalability problem is huge. There's another problem which is kind of related, but I would say it deserves being mentioned. Is also healthcare medical decisions are in general pretty bad. We were talking about the decisions that people make on their own going to Google, but even doctors, like the average quality of decision making is not that great. There's anywhere, depending on the statistics you look at, between 400,000 and 700,000 deaths a year in the US alone caused by medical misdiagnosis. So
Hmm.
that's mistakes that are being done. So it's one of the leading causes of death in the US, which is, I mean, when I read the numbers, I really, the reason I have two numbers is because I kept looking for more studies, and there's different studies with different numbers, but they're between those 400,000
Hmm.
and 700,000. Which either way, it's crazy, right? So I think if you add those two things up and you project to the future, like, hey, those are getting worse, right? It's like we live longer, there's more people, there's less doctors, there's less nurses, and we end up making worse decisions, not because we have worse doctors. It's just because we also have a lot more information to parse.
Hmm.
We have, it's more complex. It's there's a lot more things going on. We also live longer, so there's new things happening. So anyway, I think the key aspect for me is AI addresses those two things, right? It addresses scalability directly, because it enables to automate things that can be done much more efficiently and can be done automatically. So then the doctor has time for other things. So then you can have a doctor serve many more people than it did before. So that's the scalability problem is very much solvable with AI, and the quality one also, because even as of today, there's algorithms that are better at diagnosing um, diseases than the average doctor is. So, and this is getting better by the day, and we are going to get to a point that the accuracy of those AI algorithms is going to be close to 100%. Which, by the way, in the case of doctors in some studies, is literally a little bit over 50%. So it's pretty bad. So I think if you combine those two things together and you think AI can solve scalability, it can also solve quality of decision making. You get to the conclusion that, like, it's not about if, it's about how much should we use, right? Like, it's
Mm.
almost irresponsible. And I know there's always sort of like the caveat of like, oh, we need to be careful because it can go wrong. Sure, yes, it can go wrong, and there's risk, and we need to make sure that we have the right guardrails, and um, it is going to happen. There's at some point something that is combining AI and healthcare is going to go wrong, just like in self-driving cars, right? But
Mm.
think about the many millions of lives that it can save, and how much better as a whole humanity can be by using this tool. So I think it's almost irresponsible not to be using AI at this point to scale medicine and to improve the quality of medical decision making.
Yeah, as a developer, I can relate to the problem of just the quantity of information that a doctor has to process. Like you go to a
Yeah.
doctor and they may have 15 minutes to spend time with you. They've had patients all day. They haven't seen you for, maybe half a year. So they don't remember everything about you perhaps. And I'm old enough to see that when my doctor pulls out my file, it's quite thick. And I'm thinking there's no way that he's going to be able to sort of look at all that data and understand anything that maybe is not apparent without really digging through that stuff. And as a developer, like, we just understand that those are algorithmic problems, those are big data problems, and those are things that the computers are really good at solving. So I think taking advantage of the tools that we have that can enhance healthcare is going to be one of those, I mean, places where people aren't necessarily focused on. I think the shiny things like ChatGPT or Midjourney that is very visual, generating all these photos. Those are things that are, clearly, I think, in the news. But I think the things that are really going to have huge impacts are going to be some of the, machine learning research being done with like drugs and some of the things that computers are just good at that people won't be able to match. But in a way, as you mentioned, it's really going to change the profession and allow people to have things. And we saw some examples, that I mentioned before. We saw some really huge improvements, like the ability of these tools to detect things like cancer, breast cancer, a lot better or a lot more effectively. And so, whenever we can use those tools to enhance humanity, I think we're not replacing doctors. I think that they're still going to, you know, be needed and be able to make those personable decisions about people. But I think there's a huge role that we can play there
Yeah.
as people who have that ability to understand the actual problem is almost like an algorithmic big data, computer problem that can really help here. So,
Yeah, I
uh,
mean, you use an example that is exactly something that we were using at Quora, and I agree with you with this notion of like the doctor co-pilot, right? If you were talking about, well, you go to the doctor, imagine that your doctor, instead of pulling all the file and trying to figure out what the hell is going on, would have an AI sitting next to them and could ask the AI like, hey, summarize the history of Ray to me. And by the way, I see that he's having this symptom. Has this happened to him before? And the AI would go
mhm.
down the file and say, oh, 3 years ago, Ray had this. And by the way, this is something you might be want to be check out for because his family has a history of whatever. And
Hmm.
that would be amazing, right? Like you have that ability to summarize, to extract information, to present it to the doctor, to highlight, and even follow up on some things by making it much more scalable. I think that's exactly the point. And yes, it's not about replacing; it's about scaling them, and scaling humans in general, and augmenting humans so they can be much more efficient and much better.
Super interesting. So I know this is a weird transition question, but what are some of the similarities and differences between maybe some of the work that you were doing in health and this new role that you have at LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's not weird. It's actually there's more similarities than you would imagine. I mean,
Mm.
so at my startup, I was working on state of the art generative AI conversational systems for healthcare. So there's a combination of really cutting edge technology, and also a great mission, and a big positive mission for humanity, right? Scaling healthcare, bringing healthcare to millions of people. So at LinkedIn, I basically have a similar, combination of using the state of the art models, and ChatGPT and GPT-4, and this new wave of AI in the context of also a great mission, right? Which is empowering um, workers around the world, and connecting job seekers to opportunities, and to improving people's career and professional life. So I think the connection between the state of the art AI and a great mission is very similar. There's also the fact that I always like doing this in a very user facing way, right? I like working on products that have impact on real people. I'm not one that is happy working on the back end of the sort of like infrastructure, and selling to enterprises. I want to see the people that are I'm having impact on. So there's a lot of similarities. The difference, of course, is I was in a startup with um, about 50 people, and it's different
A
to
little
do
bit
that in
bigger.
the context. Yeah, it's different to do that in the context of a small uh, early stage startup than to do it in a large company like LinkedIn with 900 million members or more, and even more so with the support of Microsoft and the Microsoft family. That's been really interesting since I joined, being able to access all the amazing technology that Microsoft, OpenAI, Microsoft Azure has, that enables sort of like to think at a even bigger scale, right?
Hmm. That's really amazing. So tell me about the challenges that you're most excited about as you move into your new role as this VP for product strategy at LinkedIn. Talk maybe a little bit about what that means, and perhaps what's really exciting about where you are and what you're doing. You mentioned 900 million members and growing soon. Who knows? Next year might be a billion already. And there's a lot of opportunities that to have like a direct impact on people. So what are you excited about?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, you mentioned about the role. It's a very unique and exciting role, and that's one of the reasons that I decided to join. Of course, I report to yeah, the head of AI, data and AI, but I also report dotted line to Tomer, the head of product. So I'm kind of working in between deep technological AI solutions and product decisions, and that for me, it's amazing, right? That's exactly what I like. I like working across those two areas, and connecting the dots between those two areas is something that I really really enjoy, and I'm very excited about. um, and as you can imagine, in this time and age, and as you said at the beginning, it seems you're always in the right place at the right time. It does feel like it right now, right? Because it feels like
Hmm.
that this is exactly the moment where you want to be connecting the dots between this deep new technology and what it's able and capable of doing, and what is it going to do in the product and how can it be used, and informing and connecting the dots between those two areas is really key. So I'm very excited about enabling more AI features that have direct impact on our mission and the members. So that's really the driving force. I think there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of projects going on, and there's a lot of hard technical problems and challenges that need to be solved. And I like those challenges. I mean, I thrive when I see challenges and opportunities. I'm like, gosh, we need to solve this because then we're going to unlock all these exciting things. So that's pretty much the reason I wake up and I'm excited every day.
That's pretty awesome. Yeah, this is really an exciting time for all of us, and just being in this moment where you can actually feel the entire world, making a shift and moving towards kind of a shared goal where I feel like we're all becoming perhaps something like a cyborg where we're combining what humans do with what machines do. Now, talking about that, I love this post that you had written about the three things that were important in trying to anticipate how AI is going to be evolving in the next few months. And you mentioned a few things. You mentioned less hallucinations, the superiority of open source models, and perhaps smaller models, which is really interesting, having better capabilities. So, talk about how some of these recent developments, I mentioned before, developments like ChatGPT 4, Meta's Llama, Midjourney 5, Palm E from Google, how those perhaps are fulfilling or maybe changing your mind about these sort of goals of where AI is going to be going soon.
Yeah, yeah, it's something that I've been focusing on and trying to understand and interpret as it moves very fast, right? So this is an exciting moment because you are trying to anticipate what's going to happen in 6 months or a year, and you're always surprised when you get to that point, right? Because yeah, it's really hard to anticipate and really hard to foresee because things are moving so quickly. But I think and that's why uh, it's funny because when I talk to some of the VCs and investors in Silicon Valley, there some of them are so confused. They're just following a scattershot approach, right? Any company, any startup that has generative AI in their pitch deck, they're going to get an investment because it's just in case something happens, because it's really hard for people to anticipate where our opportunity is going to happen and how those things are going to evolve. And you see also a lot of startups pivoting super hard and really quickly because of how rapidly things are changing. But I think the bottom line and the key thing that I've come to the strong conclusion, I think a lot of people think the same way, is anything that you see as state of the art right now, anything that you see like an announcement like GPT-4 this week, or um, yeah, let's focus on GPT-4, right? GPT-4 is like, wow, it blows everyone's mind. It combines image understanding, and it's way better at many things than ChatGPT. Whatever you see right now blowing your mind is going to be um, pretty much commoditized in a
Hmm.
few months. Now, how many? I don't know if it's 6 or 12 months, but it's going to be along those lines. So if you think about it in this frame of mind, it's pretty mind-boggling, right? Like, what do you mean? Like something that just came out today is going to be widely available for everyone in 6 to 12 months? And I think the answer is yes. And there's also very rapidly, as you mentioned, open source models. All the big labs and companies are open sourcing models, like Llama, uh, and there's Google just published a couple of weeks ago another version of Flan UL2, which is even better than Llama, and many things. So I think you're going to have, again, soon, models that are as good as GPT-4 that are open source. Now, there's also going to be better models than GPT-4, right? At the same time, in 6 to 12 months, you're going to have, and I'm making this up. I don't know anything that people don't know, but you're going to have GPT-5 or 6. So those two things are going to be evolving in parallel. Like there's always going to be bigger and better models that are going to be state of the art and are going to blow your mind. And the ones that blew your mind 6 or 12 months ago are going to be easily available, and everyone is going to be able to use them. So think about it, right? How that's going to be impacting every product, every business at every level, right? So I think that's something that needs to be included in everyone's roadmap for the next few months, if not year.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So the things that we see right now as revolutionary are not going to take decades. It's going to be months. I mean, yesterday, I think it was this morning or yesterday, Midjourney, which is able to create all these amazing graphics, released a new version, and they fixed the problem that they had with hands. Sometimes you get a hands with way too many fingers, or you got like a mouth with like 50 teeth. So they have addressed those issues, and everything that it generates can be so photorealistic that that might impact photography, stock photography, those type of things. And one of the things that they mentioned was that their new model, the next version of Midjourney, was going to be available in 2 months. So we went from, you were talking about how the history of some of these things date back all the way to the 50s, the 60s, like all these models are actually have been around for quite a while and people don't realize that. But now we're having like, almost like how on, software engineering, you see these like really quick cycles of software development that just are able to iterate very quickly, and we're seeing that accelerate so fast. Who knows, in the future we might see actually AI, since it is able to really accelerate how the productivity of engineers now. We're going to see maybe these cycles accelerate as well. And that's going to be a really interesting time. You mentioned the multimodality of GPT-4. It can accept graphics. I saw somebody take a photo of their fridge and asked GPT to give me a recipe of what I could make with what I have on my fridge. That's crazy. I saw it able to understand jokes that require quite a complicated human-like context, but that it's able to see these things visually and be able to sort of add that visual input, and also larger inputs and outputs. So you're able to feed it 25,000, pieces of text. So speaking of opportunity, what do you think are some of the great opportunities for maybe individuals and business in the space where everything is moving so fast? Some people are asking, maybe what should I be studying? Some companies, you mentioned that everybody's trying to jump in. What are some of the big opportunities that you see in this space?
Yeah. No, I think going back to the commoditization of AI, I think the way to think about it is very soon every single digital product is going to have AI, right? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of how every product is going to be using some AI capability. It's just like right now, you don't even ask if a product is online and is connected to the internet, right? It's just a fact. Like,
Hmm.
why wouldn't it, right? So I think we're going to very soon be in a place where every product is going to have a variation, a version of some series of AI power features. So I I know that a lot of people, when Chat GPT came out and they realized that this was coming, they rushed to basically rethink their whole product roadmap in a sense that they're like, wow, this enables a bunch of other features that we were not thinking about. And I'm not saying you should be as radical as that, as just throw away your product roadmap and rewrite it, because I'm sure there's some basic things that you still need to do. But yes, you should be thinking hard about how to incorporate AI into your product in the next few months. And if you're not doing it now, you're probably already a little bit late, and somebody else, your um, mm, competitors, probably thinking about it. So, but there's a lot of opportunities, right? There's a lot of opportunities on making things much more usable, much more personal, much more efficient. I mean, some of mm, the the demos we've seen, for example, from Microsoft. I've seen demos from Excel where you're going to be able to work with spreadsheets and with numbers and with formulas by just basically talking to the
Mm.
spreadsheet, right? Which is kind of crazy, but that's going to enable a lot of people that didn't have access to this tooling to be able to do it. And you mentioned coding, same thing, right? People are going to be able to
Mhm.
develop things with relatively low understanding of coding and programming. So there's a big kind of a equalizing element to AI too, which is something we should use wisely. And I think it will be very interesting that we're going to be unlocking a lot of people to be able to build and use tools that they weren't able to use before. And from a user perspective or from an individual perspective, I think it's really important that individuals understand that this is coming and get ready, and they anticipate, and they become knowledgeable in all those things and toolings and abilities that these models and these AIs have in order to use it. So I think, again, democratizing access to this knowledge is really key. I just finished recording a course on prompt engineering that is going to be available soon on LinkedIn Learning that I'm very excited about, exactly along those lines, right? I think prompt engineering and understanding how to talk to the AIs is going to be a key asset, and something that I think schools, instead of banning it, they should be teaching it already and encouraging kids to understand how to use those tools responsibly, of course, but how to use
Mhm.
them. So I think uh, this is something that is coming, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities both for businesses and individuals.
Yes, prompt engineering feels like the programming language of the next decade. So far we've been, requiring people that have a deep understanding of what the computer needs in order to do work, efficiently. So we have loops, we have like linked lists, we have all these programming things that are basically making people behave in a way that it's easy for the computer to understand. But some of that is going away now because the computer can understand a better context of what we need and what we mean, and is able to generate those things for us a little bit better. So that those are some really good points. So we've had at LinkedIn a couple of huge weeks. Last week we released something called collaborative articles, and it allows LinkedIn to generate articles that are basically conversation starters. And we had this great article, um, with our 900 million members, we're able to unlock 10 billion years worth of knowledge to, help you tackle problems. So the way that these works is by creating some articles that become conversation starters. And then from that, we ask some of the experts in the fields to collaborate and create broader things by adding some comments. So can you talk a little bit about how that is leveraging that ability to sort of use our secret sauce at LinkedIn, and it's able to leverage these 10 billion years of experience that comes from the 900 million plus members that we have?
Yeah, a great question. Yeah, super excited about this first generative AI feature, the collaborative articles. I, I don't know if people understand that there's a really kind of meta thing about that feature, is that we are using the AI to prompt humans, not the other way around, right? So if you think about it, what you were saying, this conversation starters is literally the AI prompting us, prompting the members to talk, right? Which is something that is somewhat unique, but it's also not unheard of. In the healthcare space, we were using the same thing. The AI was the one prompting and asking the patient to give information because we needed information from the patient, and the AI was driving the questions rather than the answers, right? We usually have this notion of like, oh, we ask something from the AI and we get an answer. It could be the other way around, right? So in this
Mhm.
case, also the collaborative articles, the AI is creating something and putting it in front of you to elicit some knowledge and some information. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter so much whether the AI is right or wrong in what it's writing. What it matters is how can we extract this huge, uh, knowledge that is available in our members, in their experience and what they've done before, and how they've solved some of their work-related situations, in order to share that with others and to get them to learn. So a little bit like you're doing in in your show and your podcast, asking people and sort of like sharing knowledge. We prompt members through these articles to share experiences around some very specific topics that are work related. So that's a really I think a really interesting feature. It's the first one, but it's already super aligned to sort of like obviously what we want LinkedIn to become and what we want the product to have. And it's also one of the first uses that have been public of GPT-4. So we're also using the latest models and the latest technology thanks to Microsoft and OpenAI and our being part of the family. So that's been very exciting to see, particularly for me jumping into the LinkedIn ship as this was already happening, and sort of like seeing how it got built very quickly and made it to the product. So um, really, really exciting technology behind the scenes, but more importantly, a really kind of smart usage of that technology in service of the mission and in service of people and the members, and in very aligned to the mission of sort of like getting people to share this knowledge in the network and getting others to benefit.
So hold on, you're confirming that LinkedIn is already using GPT-4 today in some of these new technologies that are appearing, right?
We are, yes, we are, yeah.
That's fantastic. So definitely pays to have good connections in the industry and be able to leverage some of these tools like immediately. So I'm really excited to see what else comes up. And actually, another thing that happened yesterday was this announcement that we have another new feature, the ability to write job descriptions using ChatGPT. And I think that this is the very first part of the lot of tools that we're gonna come up with. So the how is what so people when they use ChatGPT, they think, well, ChatGPT is already able to maybe take my information and process it and generate some things for me, like perhaps a job description. Um, how is this different? What is in the context of the things that LinkedIn knows that makes us different than just using something like ChatGPT?
Yeah, it's a great question. We did announce the job description feature. We also announced an enhancer for your profile, which can help you write your profile in a better way. So those two features um, are also um, in the product now being tested, and they both highlight a very important thing, right? Like, I think for every business, every company, every product, you need to ask that question, right? Like, why would anyone use this feature in the product versus just going to ChatGPT and, as you said, putting some information and getting an answer? And the reason is, for products like LinkedIn, we have a lot of information that ChatGPT does not have, and that enables us to do two things that are very important, right? One is to personalize. So this is the going back to the recommendation personalization, right? Like, we can personalize the response to the member because we know who you are, we know about you, and we know what your it's going to be good for you in your professional life. But also, very importantly, we have a lot of domain expertise. So we don't only know information about you, we have information about 900 million people. We have information about jobs. We know what works in some context for some jobs and doesn't work for some others. And we can apply that in the way we talk to the AI. So all of that goes into what we ask the AI, right? So if you are Ray and you say, hey, why don't you enhance my profile for me to this new feature? What the feature is going to do, what the AI is receiving, is not only information about Ray, is information about what LinkedIn knows that for a profile like yours is going to work and it's not going to work, and how people that are in your field and companies that are in your field are going to be looking at your profile. That's a lot of context and a lot of domain expertise about this specific aspect that uh, ChatGPT doesn't have. And in fact, it's very important to understand that all these big models, they have a lot of knowledge, but they're also trained on a random Reddit thread. So they have bad and good knowledge. They know good medicine, they know bad medicine. And depending on how you ask and what you ask and what exact context you give, you are going to come up with a good answer, or you're going to come up with something that is completely BS, right? So it is key that people understand that they can't really trust everything that comes out from the AI, and therefore the way you prompt them, the way you ask them, and what kind of context, what kind of information you have about what you're looking for is a really key aspect. That's why, again, prompt engineering is also very important here.
Yeah, and I think that what you talk about here, context, is really everything in getting the right kind of information. That's why prompt engineering is so important, that you are able to give the computer the more and more context. When you create applications with ChatGPT 4, what you have is the ability to let the machine understand all the context. We have so much information about careers, jobs, where you want to go, people with the same job title, and what do they know that you don't know. As you try to move up in your industry, we know what people above like your org chart need to have in order for you to know. So those are the things that we've actually been considering for such a long time, that I think are now going to be possible with something like AI. So I want to move up really quick. We're almost out of time, to just answering a couple of questions from people. This is a pretty interesting question from Abimael. So what do you think of putting ChatGPT as a skill for a resume? Interesting. I think definitely
Uh,
maybe prompt engineering, might be something great here, but I don't know, ChatGPT itself.
Yeah, I align with what you're saying. Is what does it mean to know ChatGPT, right? So I think
Hmm.
uh, um, mm, this is like if you tell me I know how to speak, sure, but what are you speaking about, and how are you talking? So I think prompt engineering is probably a good skill to add to your profile. ChatGPT in itself, and by the way, ChatGPT is a particular product and a particular instance. And
Hmm.
as we know now, there's ChatGPT Plus, which includes GPT-4. So it's kind of it's saying, I know Photoshop, which again, some people will put it as a skill. It's like, I know a product, a particular product. So I would maybe make that equivalent. If you say ChatGPT is a skill on your profile, it's similar to say, I know this particular program, right? I know Photoshop. But if you want to say,
Hmm.
I know how it works and I understand how to use it correctly, I would say more like, I know prompt engineering. Just like, instead of saying I know Photoshop, I would say I know digital image processing or digital image editing, right?
Yeah, perhaps if you do say something like, I have a lot of experience with ChatGPT, just like you would in a resume, you would want to say, what have you done with it? So I use it to do these, to create weekly reports. I use it to perhaps accomplish the following tasks, like, some of the things that I've been using it for lately is taking this live stream and having ChatGPT give me, hey, tell me what the highlights were and the time codes for where I can
Yeah.
obtain a clip of what happened in the interview. Like those are things that it takes me a long time to do, but a computer is perfect for that type of job. So start thinking about what can you say that you are doing with some of these tools that are generated results. And those are the types of things that I think you highlight in a resume. So a couple more questions. So Tricia here, it's a long question, but what about non-technical professionals, people who don't code, need to know about AI? It's like how much do you need to know before you actually start using this? So I think part of the answer here is actually not very much. This is kind of the beauty
Yeah.
of AI, that it's democratizing. I think you mentioned that word, some of this knowledge. Whereas, for us developers who used to have to like learn all these, different frameworks and complicated things and data analysis and I saw your video from YouTube, complicated formulas on how to solve like recommendation problems. The computers are going to start maybe knowing some of that. What do you think?
No, I totally agree. I think that's part of the beauty of these new models, AI models. You don't need to learn to code to uh, directly interact with them. You can talk to them. You can show them images. I don't know if people saw. There's one of the demos from GPT-4 yesterday, which was basically a crude drawing of a website on a piece of paper that was shown to the AI, and the AI generates the actual code that builds
Mm.
that website, right? That's mind-boggling, right? I think maybe that's something that somebody like Trisha, if she's wondering, like, I don't know how to code, how would I use that? Like, gosh, you can literally draw a website how you want it, show it to the AI, and get at least a mock, and then start working around, like, no, differently, or change this color, or change that particular aspect of the website. So I think uh, it is going to enable people to interact with computers much more naturally without needing to code.
So the last question, I'm a project manager with skills built around business fields, but I want to get into the AML world without having much technical talent. What are some good professional options for people like me? I am so glad that Faye asked this question, because that leads into the next sort of announcement that we have. And that is that we made an announcement yesterday that we're releasing 100 artificial intelligence courses totally for free in LinkedIn. So if you're trying to get into this field, I think the best thing to do is start learning everything you can. I mean, that's how people make transitions into new fields. They start, with prompt engineering, start looking at ChatGPT and what it can do. But one of the ways that we're helping is by releasing 100 different courses on everything from more kind of general knowledge topics like what is generative AI, to very specific machine learning with Python, things like that. And as I understand, you are actually in our Carpinteria studios in California, actually doing something right now. That's why your background looks amazing, by the way. So
Thank
it's really, we
you.
have some fantastic studios there. This isn't like your house or your
No, no, it is
basement,
not.
So
It
what can
is
you tell
not
me about
great.
this, the way you're working on over there?
Yeah, great background, great lighting, and it's all thanks to the team here in Carpinteria, because I just finished recording one of the courses that's going to be coming up soon, and yeah, I'm connecting from the studios.
That's fantastic. So thank you so much for coming to the show this week. I know that I've been excited knowing that you were coming for such a long time. And I just want to encourage people, if they want to see past episodes of the show, the URL is this short thing that I made right here, go.rabo.org/TFIT. And they can find all the previous videos, clips from the show, and they can see the future and, past guests as well. So make sure you give that a visit. Next time, we have Brandy Nonecki, and we're going to be talking about how humanity and artificial intelligence work together. I think we're going to touch on some of the topics that we mentioned. It's all connected. So she's going to talk about the human side of artificial intelligence. She's the founder and director of the Citrix Policy Lab at UC Berkeley, and associate professor of technology for the School of Public Policy. She's been featured in Wired Magazine, NPR, BBC News, MIT Technology Review, BuzzFeed, and lots of other places. So I'm super excited to have these amazing, amazing guests. Xavi, thank you so much, and enjoy your time over there in
Yeah.
California.
Thank you,
Take
Ray.
care. All right, bye bye.